Listen to me. If there was a wise man who would ever think of this, they would say in order to be superior to the man, you've got to be the man. For I am the man himself.
What is going on, guys? This is the Club of the Man 1993 back here for the WWE 24 review. And man, I was scared to watch this one, but I was definitely wondering how I would feel watching this WWE 24 Thank You Daniel Bryan documentary. This was the first time I had watched this documentary since before Bryan was cleared to wrestle again in 2018. And I don't know if it's because I watched it. So I watched this documentary Thursday night. I watched it when the night before my wife and I were called to go to the hospital for her induction for our son. And I don't know if it was just a combination of, watching this documentary again and just, the anxiety I had about, becoming a father and the childbirth and all that. I don't know what all it was, but I still had that, you ever get that gut pull that you have more emotions, but you don't want to show them? I still got that when watching this documentary. I still got that. And I think it might be because I just watched it at the wrong time. Had I not watched it when I did, if I was just having a normal headspace and whatnot, I probably would have been, I don't think I would have been quite as emotional watching this as I have been before. Before Bryan, of course, was able to clear it and he was cleared. He came back to wrestle, but yeah, I would have a lot to say about this documentary because we all know Daniel Bryan is the reason why I became a fan of wrestling. And if you see any pause, by the way, it's just both of my dogs just laying next to me right now as I record this. But he was my favorite wrestler. He always has and always will be my favorite wrestler. He is, again, the reason why I became a full-time wrestling fan, not just a casual viewer with some friends. And him retiring in 2016 was hard for me. I got to see him have the biggest moment of his career, then just for all to be taken away from him just like that. And when he came back, we thought everything was good again. Then he got taken away again because of the concussion issues. And this documentary was kind of 24 hours of Bryan just going through the day, getting ready for the moment to officially announce his retirement, but also taking to me, watching this, every time I watch this documentary, it feels like you're watching the Daniel Bryan just say yes, yes, yes documentary, basically, about his career leading up to his big moment at WrestleMania, at WrestleMania 30. And of course, it actually does go as far as his match with Roman Reigns at Fastlane in 2015, after he came back from his neck surgery. But it kind of felt like they recapped all that. And then, once they got up to speed in 2015, where they left off, that's where they kind of just, dug more into, the history of, how he thinks he first hurt his neck, and then, the concussions and all that stuff. And then, of course, just, emphasizing about how different ways, but how Bryan tries not to cry on the day of his retirement. But yeah, we're going to get into, all of it and go from there. Like I said, he obviously was not ready to retire. None of us were ready for him to retire. Like I said, I still remember that day very, like, almost word for word. Because I remember at the time I was interning with my ex's dad's company, and I was sitting at my computer editing videos I was working on for them, and it was around, like, I think 1:30, 2 o'clock. I got a text from my friend Daniel Bryan, and it was a screenshot from Bryan's Twitter saying that he was going to be announcing his retirement on Raw, and my heart just sank. I literally had just met him, and funny enough, which we find out through here, I met him the day after he was first told he had to retire. When he was at the World of Wheels convention in 2016, he literally found out the day before that convention that he had to retire. And unfortunately, my friend, when he met him, he said, "Yeah, they need to clear. They probably need you." And Bryan's like, "Yeah, we'll see about that," or something like that. He said, but unfortunately, like I said, it was literally the day. I was told apparently it was the day after is when he found out, which is just a bummer. But yeah, the documentary starts off with, like, Bryan basically just saying it didn't feel like, a different day. It just felt like another day, basically, when he got up. Didn't really get into the long story, but just in the long haul, just basically started off with Bryan talking about how Vince had wanted Bryan to do his retirement on this episode of Raw because they were in his home state of Washington. Of course, he said, Bryan first said, no, I wasn't ready to do it, but he said he would call him back. He had talked to Brie, his wife, about it, which of course they did, again, touch on how much Brie has been in helping Bryan with all of his struggles through those, like, 3 or 4 years when he was just like, I'm wrestling, I'm not wrestling, I gotta retire, I'm not gonna retire. And, like, I'm going to come back and whatnot, this, and that. But they emphasized that a little later on in the show. But he talked to Brie about it, and she even said, it's not going to be the same if it was anywhere else but in your home state. So Bryan called Vince and said, fly me out to Raw. I will do the retirement on Raw on Monday. And then they kind of, again, like, started, like, recapping what we learned in that Just Say Yes documentary. He first got into wrestling in first grade because there was this kid in his class who was a new kid, I guess, who had these magazines, and he's like, I gotta show you guys something, but you can't tell anyone about it. Like, it was all private. And then he shows them these wrestling magazines, and he just got hooked after that. Of course, now he mentions that if people would have nowadays, people would have thought they were like Playboys or something. Bryan always seems to, like, zing in those random liners about, like, the most, like, out of your head, like, in the gutter type things, and it's just hilarious. He's a funny, but also just a great man in general, as I've always said for years. They just recap everything. They of course talked about him being at his main event at WrestleMania 30 and how special that was. I always he shared the line of how his nieces. Well, of course, they also briefly touched about him and his interaction with Connor Michalek, the kid for Connor's Cure. We talked about in a couple of these reviews already. And then he tells some story about how his niece has got to come into the ring with him as the confetti's coming down. One of them thinks her name was Hayden. She's kind of shy and whatnot, but I guess it was the next day. She had like a piece of the confetti on her shirt, and I guess she took it and went, "Oh, Mom, look, this is from Uncle Brian's little party with all of his friends," or something like that. It was cute to hear him say that. And then they went into about how him and Brie got married the Friday after WrestleMania, and then they went on their honeymoon, and it was literally at the time probably the best 2 weeks of his life. But then when they got back, it's like that's when things just went downhill. So when he got back, that Monday morning, his father passed away. And then I think 2 days later on that Wednesday, Connor had passed away. And then, like, I think a week or two after that was when he announced on Raw he had to have the neck surgery. They do talk about how they believe the injury started back in a match against Randy Orton in June of 2013. This was during a time when Team Hell No had just dropped the tag titles to the Shield, and Bryan was trying to prove to everybody that he was not the weak link. And during that match, he did a dive and he hit his head into the barricade, and he couldn't really move his arm. And then they called off the match, which Bryan for real was furious about. And then he finds out Triple H was the one who made the call off the match, which made Bryan even more upset because he says that's the same guy who tore his quad and finished the match. And Triple H did say, yes, I made the call to do so. Yes, I know I have, continued matches before, injured like before, but, sometimes you just learn from your mistakes, and I didn't want to see Bryan do the same thing. Of course, so Bryan got pulled from the match. He was told that his neck was functional still, but at some point he was going to have to get surgery. But I said you're kind of in a tough pickle there, where it's like if he would because he could have gotten the surgery back then, and he was supposed to recover in 6 to 8 weeks. He was told after he got the surgery, which was why they originally kept the title on him in 2014. One of my cats is picking up. Hey, JoJo. Sorry, I got distracted. But he said he would recover in 6 to 8 weeks, which is why when he got the surgery originally, they didn't strip him of the title because he was supposed to recover in like a quicker period of time. But of course, he said it was tough to say. He could have gotten a surgery then, but if he got surgery then, maybe he wouldn't have main evented WrestleMania. But now it's just like he gets it taken away from him, and all that jazz. So it was a lose-lose situation here and there. Honestly, here's something I thought of. What if? Because if you remember, they did the turn at SummerSlam 2013. He did win it back at Night of Champions, but then he got pulled away because of the fast tap as they called it. Not saying anything against the feud with him and the Wyatt family. That was still a great feud, and he got Bray Wyatt moreover in that feud. But they didn't quite have to do it. What if Bryan would have gotten the surgery then? Because he would have gotten the momentum. They could have done something with the Authority, writing him off TV. And then, hey, even if Bryan, they didn't have Bryan win the Rumble still, they probably didn't want to, they still could have had him come back and tell the same story, except they could have done an injury angle to write him off TV or something. Just something like that to suggest. Because he waited so long, there was much more pressure on the one nerve, I think it was in the brain, not in the brain, in his neck, that caused him to take a little while longer to get his strength back. Which, that's like Brie said, literally he was on top of the world in April, and then that summer he lost pretty much everything. His dad, Connor, the title, all that. It was just a bad summer for him. And unfortunately, it was not a good summer for him again for a few years, but we all know that. So finally, he gets cleared to come back to the ring. And then, of course, we all know he didn't win the Royal Rumble. He ended up winning the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 31. But then, the following week on SmackDown, he had a match against Sheamus. And he suffered a concussion in that match. And I think he still wrestled 1 or 2 matches after that. Because I remember at the time, the last match he had ever had before he retired was a tag match he had when he teamed up with John Cena when they were both the United States and Intercontinental Champions. They teamed up and took on the team of Tyson Kidd and Cesaro, the Brass Ring Club. That was such a so underrated tag team. It's too bad, again, Tyson Kidd got injured. But of course, they get into how Brie had made Bryan promise her that if he would get another concussion, he would come clean about some of things he had been hiding, which apparently was 4 like post concussion seizures he apparently had suffered. So of course, he got that concussion. He relinquished the Intercontinental Championship, and then he of course was going to see doctors, and he was getting cleared, but Dr. Maroon just said, "I'm sorry, but with your history of concussions, I can't find it in me to clear you." Just you saw him dangerous. It's just you saw him as a flight risk, and they just didn't want to have him paralyzed and in a wheelchair. So of course one doctor said yes. Dr. Maroon said no. He's like, "Can we get a third doctor's opinion?" Which he did get. I think he got another doctor's opinion. They cleared him. But Dr. Maroon still just said, "I can't pull the trigger." So Bryan basically was going to go to see another doctor to do whatever he could to show that he was okay. I guess he found some more advanced specialists in New York which honestly, based off of the Talk Is Jericho interview he had when he first came back in 2018, this kind of may have been a mistake for him to do. Because even after that, because there was this doctor he went to. It was like some more advanced doctor that does like tests on like other like football athletes and like I forgot what, but basically he was like an advanced specialist. And when they did these advanced tests that neurologists don't do, I guess they found like a small subacute in whichever portion of the brain that it was in, which is the cause of the post-concussion seizures. That was the final nail on the coffin, making him, realize, yes, I have to retire. He has a family to think about. Him and Brie want to start having kids. Before they gave birth to Birdie and Buddy. They would eventually, of course, have their 2 kids. And of course, he didn't want to do it, but he knew that he had to. So then, they focused throughout the day, Bryan's saying his farewells to everyone. Seth Rollins had several interviews saying how, much of a hero Bryan was to him, and how, he was just sad he couldn't be there, because that was at the time when he was out with his ACL injury. Mark Henry apparently was telling him, well, they were saying how, Bryan was hoping that Mark Henry was he was going to pull a Mark Henry and do like a fake retirement. It's like someone posted a picture on Twitter with Bryan's head edited into Mark Henry's with that big pink salmon suit. It was hilarious. Bryan also mentioned how Mark Henry really stuck his neck out for him at the beginning of his career, when he said he had no reason to have to do that, but he still did it, and he was forever grateful for it. Of course, I said they did have when Bryan was talk about how how he's feeling today, and it's it's he gets the back and forth emotions, and it's oh no, it's coming. He mocks how he tries to stop himself. It's you bite down your mouth and your eyes are try not to cry. But all the different farewells, people to make the time to talk with him. He wanted to, of course, talk to Vince. He, of course, he was going to be closing the show. Said he has an open mic, say whatever he wants. The only request he has just ended on him doing the yes chant. And then he says, what I should say, I'm not going to do tomorrow. And he goes, you do that, we'll come out there, gotta go, whatever. Funny enough, of course, also, this was the night where Titus O'Neil got suspended for 6 days and almost fired too, because of the thing where he told Vince to let Stephanie go back first after Bryan was exiting from his speech and whatnot. But yeah, that's a whole other story. So anyways, of course, his family was there. Bryan came out at the end of the show. I think he talked for a good 25 minutes or something like that. So I remember when I watched this, I think the show ended at 11:20, because that's when Raw still had the overrun. But he came out, cut a very excellent emotional speech. I like how, before he started talking, he just took it all in, and then he let the chants just rattle off, and he just started smiling, and he says, I can't help this every time I come out, you guys always just start chanting. I can't help but get this little like smile on my face. I can't hide it because at just this moment, before I started talking, I wanted to just take it all in and just close my eyes and just feel all the excitement and everything you guys have done to make things happen for me in my career. But to address the elephant in the room again, like I said, he has his history of concussions. He has a family to think about as well. He wants to start starting a family soon. Of course, everybody's chanting yes, and then Bryan goes, "That's what Brie says all the time." And they show Brie backstage cracking up laughing. So, of course, he then announces that, he's officially announcing his retirement. But then he's just emphasizing, how he woke up and I guess how grateful he was for everything. He was grateful that he got to do this for 16 years. He was grateful that, because of wrestling, he got to meet Brie, which again, he talked about how she was just basically just been a huge support system for him and helping him, figure out the right things to do. Even, of course, when Bryan made his way back in 2018 and how basically she told him not to quit, because we all know Bryan hated when he was GM. He absolutely hated it. And he basically said that because there was some things he was told he had to stop doing on Talking Smack. Like, he was calling, like, I think when he, like, kind of, like, it was, like gangstering out with the Usos, I remember, or how he kept calling James Ellsworth the big hog. He was told not to do that. He said in an interview, I think he was saying that he purposely did because he was trying to get fired. Because he knew that everywhere else was clearing him. Which we'll, of course, talk about that whole story another time. But to focus on this here. But no, actually, the one thing to mention, that last doctor he went to, though, I guess what he was told before they cleared him eventually was that those doctors were basing his results off of an MMA fighter and not an MMA fighter's brain and not like a normal person's brain as it needed to be. Compared to a normal person's brain, he was normal. But for MMA fighters that have like faster reflexes and whatnot, but that's for a whole other time. But yeah, he then talked about things he liked doing, like, he liked diving through the ropes, made him feel like Superman. He even mentioned Connor Michalek, or him getting a tag team with someone like Kane and whatnot, who may seem scary, but is very intelligent and whatnot. Talk about all these other things that happened in his career. But I think one of the last things he talked about before he wrapped up his speech, and I still remember this was the part of his speech that I almost lost it. Like, that made me like the most emotional when it first happened, was when he mentioned how grateful he was for the segment before TLC 2013 where they had that Champion Ascension segment where they're going to be merging the titles in the match with Cena and Orton. The crowd hijacked the show and John Cena broke character and acknowledged him. But what was special about that night was Bryan's dad was there, and they didn't show the clip where he said it in this video, but he said in the speech that was the last time his dad got to see him wrestle in person, and we all made that special. And he was just grateful for everyone, all of his friends, his family, all of his coworkers, everyone. And then he did wrap up the speech saying how tomorrow he starts his new life where he's no longer a wrestler, but that's tomorrow and not tonight. And he wants to get one last yes chant. And the yes, yes, yes. And Brie came out, and see, even now I'm getting a tad bit emotional talking about it. Dang it! I shouldn't be. He got to come back and wrestle, which, I'll be real again, like I said, I was not ready for Bryan to retire. But, like, even though, like I said, I wasn't a fan of how... You see, I still don't think that match he had with Mox at Wrestle Dream had to be his final match. I know he said that's how he wanted it to be, but I'm hoping he does. He's just on like a part-time schedule now and wrestles occasionally here and there. But I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I felt like he needed like a better, more fitting way to go out. The guy is just so freaking humble that he's willing to put anyone over, make them look good, which I appreciate. But again, it's like, you still deserve that swan song yourself. You deserve that standing ovation. He never got in WWE when he had his last match against Roman Reigns in 2021. And now so far, he just gets taken out by injury to end his career. It's like, can you please give this guy his flowers like some way or whatnot? But yeah, Brie came out. Everybody else came out on the stage. Bryan high-fived all the fans in the front rows. Then he says, I want to get out of there. He goes, he was just a wreck. He was still emotional, but he felt he did the right thing at the time. And then, of course, the crowd, then they get into, him saying he doesn't quite know what's really next for him. Because like he said, he would, at the time, he said he would still like to be involved somehow with WWE, but he didn't know what yet. He described it as like being in love with someone and breaking up. They get married to someone else and they say, it's all good that we can still be best friends. And he's like, right, but right now I just need my space. They basically just ended with a bunch of like, bunch of wrestlers saying, thank you, Daniel, and, sharing small little like, blurbs like, thank you for bringing the best out of me and whatnot, or like, thank you, Daniel, for, like Cody mentioned, not only, being a coworker, but also a friend as well. All this other stuff. Brie, they show some fans, and he basically just ends up with just again reminding us how grateful he is for everything. And the last thing he just says is thank you, and that does it. I definitely talked a lot. Once or twice I choked a tad bit, but I'm good. Like I said, it's very great to know Bryan was able to fight for them to reinvestigate his case and work things out. That he's able to come back for, you realize, 6 more years and wrestle. Like I said, he could still be doing things part-time. I don't know if we can do with AEW wrestling part-time, or he's just going to be involved with backstage and, just focus on being a dad or whatnot. But I'm much more satisfied with his career that he got to do that. But yeah, definitely I would say probably the hardest one for me to watch was this one. Because like I said, as a Daniel Bryan fan, as the guy who was the reason for me watching, this was sad to watch. This was probably, in my opinion, one of the saddest days for me as a wrestling fan. Not the angriest. The angriest is still Royal Rumble 2015, but, that's here and there. But yeah, great documentary. Next one is another favorite of mine, which is the one of Seth Rollins' redesign, rebuild, reclaim. The story of Seth Rollins' journey back to wrestling after he suffered his ACL injury, which I still think should have led to Rollins coming back as a face. Instead, they brought him back as a heel, and that was not the best idea. But that's going to do it. That is going to do it for this 24 review of WWE24's Thank You, Daniel. What are your guys' thoughts on this documentary? Did they make you emotional at all as well, too? Any thoughts you have on Bryan's career, of course, with him coming back and whatnot? Leave your guys' thoughts again down in the comment section below. And be sure also, as always, to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well, The Club of the Man 93. You may also follow me on TikTok and Instagram at The Club of the Man 1993. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your day, and do not forget, in order to be superior to the man, you've got to be the man. And for I am the man himself. And that is not just an opinion, my friends. That is a fact of life. Yeah!